Our Future, the show that goes back to help talk about our future and yours too.
That's true.
We are back. Happy New Year. Welcome to a new year. I've got to tell this story real quick.
That's
Literally before we started, the reason I'm laughing is Tony said, because as you guys know, we've talked about, we do pre-record these shows, certainly during the holiday season. You got to do some pre-recording. And we pre-recorded, and Tony was like, dude, we're going to come back and be like, Happy New Year. Hope you had a great Christmas. We sure did. And then we end up having the crappiest Christmas in history. And I was like, well.
I just didn't want to jinx it. Like, do you say Merry Christmas? Do you say, I had the greatest Christmas? Drew, how was your Christmas? And Happy New Year. How was your New Year? And then all of a sudden we have real bad ones. I just think it's a jinx. It could be a jinx. I'm a superstitious kind of guy sometimes.
Oh, y'all have no idea. You have no. It's funny. It's funny
better.
too.
I've gotten better.
Yeah, you have. You have. In fairness, I think there was something that came up not recently, and I checked on it, and you're like, no, it's okay. You can talk to me about it. I can't remember what it was, but it was something.
Well, now you're good about sending me text messages about like, oh, are you watching anything live right now? Are you watching it live? You're watching it live.
Yeah. It only took 20 something years.
It happens.
Yeah, it does. Well, welcome to 2025. What a great year it's been so far.
It's been wonderful.
We're having fun. I hope you are too. This show is absolutely 100% supported by awesome listeners like you. We're like public television, but for your ear holes. On the show today, we're in November. We're still in 1993, but we're about to roll over. This is going to maybe carry us over into 94 after this. Is that right? Or do we have one more after this?
We're going to be here. We're going to be here in 93 for this full episode. And then the next episode, we might see some 1984. I'm going to miss it. Man. I've really enjoyed getting to talk about 1983 again. It's been a lot of fun.
It really has. And it's been super fascinating. It's interesting. And it will be interesting to see how this plays out now that we're rolling into, basically we're starting a new year in both ways and rolling into it to see how long we stay in 94. Because there's, as things progress, there's more and more crazy antics that occur, but you guys have gotten a good history of it. So let's start. Here we are. It's November 19th, 1993. The first one was a great movie, but now we get a second one. And according to my wife, this is the best of all Addams Family movies ever made. That's right, folks. Addams Family Values is on deck.
I don't necessarily disagree with her. This is one of these comedy. We've talked about comedy franchises in the past. There's several different times, and I don't think they usually get better, except for Austin Powers. But this is one of those where the second one is really, really, really funny, and maybe has the best scene of all of them for sure. I mean, because when they go to do that Thanksgiving play,
yeah,
that's pretty brilliant. That whole sequence of events in Camp Chippewa is absolutely marvelous. I mean, this is a really, really iconic scene. So, I mean, I see it quite often around Thanksgiving time as well, still to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. It was on in my house the other day. It was on, and I caught the end where, or not towards the end, but anyway, basically where Cusack, what's her name? Joan Cusack. Joan Cusack has blown up the car and tried to kill Uncle Fester, and then he obviously is not dead. And what's the hand? Is the hand Thing? The hand is Thing, right?
Yep.
Thing is driving a car, and it's so stupid and so much fun. I guess it's why I prefer these movies. I mean, I like the original show. It was fine, but I prefer these movies to anything else they've made, especially the Wednesday show. I didn't care for that so much. This was funny, and it's literally dark comedy in a way that also was endearing. And I don't know how they did this, but they did it very, very, very well.
Oh yeah, and also you get the same cast back, you get the same director, so they bring all the same people back, which doesn't always happen in comedy franchises. A lot of times they get different directors and different people, and this was a lot more of the same cast. And it's unfortunately Raul Julia's last film while he's alive. He would come out posthumously in Street Fighter, which was a movie
Yep.
that Chad Rosen worked on
Oh, there we
and
go.
was produced by his dad. Chad's father produced Street Fighter, so that will come out.
Oh,
We'll talk
interesting.
in the 1994. But yeah, this is Raul Julia's last movie while he's alive, and I really loved him as an actor. And I worked with Christopher Lloyd, and he signed a original Addams Family sleeve from a DVD. But this is a really good movie. I really enjoy it, and it's hilarious. I saw this at Carmike 10. I don't know. Did you see this in theaters?
I did. I did see this at Carmen. I saw it actually. I want to say I saw this with Wade and possibly even Amy.
Okay. Yeah, I saw this. I watched this with Mom and Jeff and a couple other family. We had some family friends along with us as well. But yeah, I mean, I was laughing my butt off during that entire Thanksgiving sequence.
It's super solid. It is. Look, it's one of the best.
Yeah.
So I know that this next movie, I know that I saw it a couple of times. I know I did see it once with my parents. I don't know if I saw it with you again. I just remember seeing it a couple times in theaters because it was a smash. Oh, real quick, let me go back before that. How
Yeah,
did
sure.
Addams Family do? How did Addams Family Values do? But like in terms of box office.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, like all movies that have sequels, they have to raise the budget because everyone gets paid more the second time around and the third time around than they did. So they did like a 47 million, and then they made about 111. So it did well. It did quite well. It didn't do as well as the first one. I mean, they never do, for the most part, outside of like you said, the occasional, the Austin Powers type films and stuff like that. Those
Right.
did, but I mean, most of the time the second ones don't do as well as the first. The first are the classics, but yeah, I mean, it did really really well, and of course, secondary markets back in this day make it a lot bigger.
Dude, yeah, I remember it's one of those movies. I want to say you could also get it on VHS from McDonald's.
There's a
It's
bunch of
one of
those.
those.
I was actually talking about those not too long ago with some people. You could get VHSs at McDonald's. You could also get the books with the
Yep.
records, stuff like that at McDonald's with
Oh yeah.
the Gremlins and all that stuff. It was pretty cool. Yeah, we were talking about that
Uh,
not too long ago.
Speaking of not related, Sarah is looking for my wife is looking for my wife. She's looking for some kind of glass something. I don't remember. And she's opened all these drawers. And she opens a drawer, and I look down, and behold, in front of me are two mint condition Return of the Jedi glasses. There's not a scratch on them
Nice.
that have been hidden from me for however long I've been married, which is almost 20 years, that are sitting there that need to be. I need to drink milk out of those. Those are milk glasses, and they need milk in them, not
Yeah,
just sitting there so no one sees them. And so I stole them.
yeah. You never knew about them?
No,
How's that possible?
because she's a pack rat. I don't know. She's a squirrel. She hides stuff in her cheeks. I don't know what she
Does
does.
she want this?
Tony got a phone call. Let's see if he comes back.
Does
from
she
his...
want
Oh!
that?
Oh my God! That is the greatest callback in the history of callbacks, folks. If you're only listening to this, he held up these headphones from what year are they? 1988?
Yeah, they're 19. Yeah, what are they? They are 1991.
1991. He found some headphones. If you don't know that story, you got to go back 2 episodes, I believe. Yeah, for that story. Okay. All right. Keeping us on track. So then we go see Hello, one of
So
the
good.
most quotable films ever made, which is Miss Doubtfire. What you got there?
It's so good.
It's
I mean,
amazing.
it did this movie, $25 million, put together this great cast. This was never supposed to be as big a hit as it was. This was a massive hit. Everybody saw this movie. Did over $440 million.
Unbelievable.
Massive hit. So funny. There's scenes in this when I was watching this in theaters, and I went with my mom and I think my brother. My brother was there too. Um, Such a funny movie. I mean, everything is so quotable, and you're watching this movie and you're just thinking to yourself. And at this point, Robin Williams has had several big hits, but you're watching this movie and when you're seeing it, you're thinking to yourself, is there anything Robin Williams can't do? I mean, at that
Right.
point, you really kind of thought he might be the best actor in all of Hollywood. You know, it's just he was always brilliant, brilliant, and I always loved him even back in the day when when he did Mork and Mindy. I was a little kid and stuff like that, but this is such a great film. Sally Field, Pierce Brosnan, kind of round out the cast, and I loved it. I saw it. I saw it multiple times in theaters. I know you and I did. You and I did go see it one time as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I've watched it countless times since. So
It's yet another McDonald's VHS. I know for a fact because I remember when my aunt, God rest her soul, when she bought it because it was a family hit amongst my family was kind of a blended extended type scenario. It was a family hit, and I remember just all of us enjoying it and laughing at it, and especially like my parents. Obviously, I understood the concept of divorce and whatnot, but it is a funnier movie as a grown man than it was when I was a teenager because the nuance is so much more into it. That now I watch it, and I've seen it maybe it was a year ago, and I laughed a lot more than I should have, and I felt a lot more than I did when I was a teenager, obviously.
yeah, I mean it won a Academy Award for best makeup, which it should have because I mean he looks
100%.
absolutely brilliant in it. So yeah, I mean Mrs. Doubtfire is a classic. I mean we're not talking about a small movie there; it's a massive classic.
Yeah, it's good stuff for sure. So moving on past that, we're starting to get into a little bit of questionable Drew territory here, where I'm going to start falling off this list on you. I'm just warning you. Uh, I remember the title of Perfect World, but I don't remember the movie A Perfect World. What is A Perfect World?
So it's a Clint Eastwood film. It's one of his. He's directed 8,000 movies in his career. I don't even think people realize how many movies Clint Eastwood has directed. He's
Right.
directed a lot of movies, a lot of movies, and this is one of them. And he stars in it as well. And he's got Kevin Costner, and Kevin Costner plays a fugitive
I
who
remember it
is
now.
who breaks out with another guy, and then they kind of hole up at a house for a little bit, and uh, he gets into a fight with the other fugitive so that he'll stop like molesting the mother of this household, and then they leave and they take the boy, the youngest boy, with them, and then the other fugitive decides that he wants to let him molest the boy, and so then that's when Kevin Costner shoots him, and then this whole thing is about Clint Eastwood trying to find this boy. Really good movie. I mean, it's it. I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily Clint Eastwood's. It's not a classic Clint Eastwood film by any means,
Right.
but it's a good one for sure. I mean, it did well. It did really well overseas, where it made most of its money. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I know it was a popular film with one of our friends, Johnny Green. I know he liked it a lot back in the day as well. But yeah, I don't remember you ever seeing it.
No, I didn't see it till later. And here's the thing: it's heavy. It's a very heavy movie. The thing about this though that's interesting is this is we're tiptoeing into the part of the we're getting closer to the part of the 90s where there are more dark, sort of gritty. We're starting to get into we're leaving those happy go lucky days of the 80s and we're getting further into that kind of dark element of the 90s where you get, even the music was heavier in terms of not just tone. Literally the lyrics were heavier. We're starting to get into that a little bit, and we're gonna start seeing the launch of like the indie vibes. So we're stepping into that. So it's interesting. I had not thought about this movie. I actually had not thought about it being a film from 1993. In my mind, it was later, but that's pretty. It's got some beautiful shots in it that are not disturbing like in weirdo ways, but are just disturbing in the context of what's happening in the scenes. It's hefty for
Yeah,
sure.
no doubt. I mean, it was shot by John Green. Um,
Yep.
sorry, Jack Green. Well, he goes by his actual name is John Green, but he goes by Jack Green. But but he had taken over for Bruce Surtees, who Bruce had been his like cinematographer for many, many, many years.
Yep.
And oddly, Brian Pitt and I would work, and Bob Shapiro. I'm gonna get a shout out to Bob Shappy Shapiro on this one. We would
Yeah,
actually
boy.
we would work with Bruce for like a little bit of time on a movie called The Last Time, and he wouldn't finish you didn't get to finish the movie. I think he was like he's an older, really an older guy by then, and I think he failed his physical and stuff like that. He had to get a different DP, but yeah, I mean, it was, he had a lot of classic cinematographers that would shoot his films, and they were just all brilliant, to be real honest with you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He frames stuff really well. All of his stuff is solid. So we move from Clint Eastwood, known name, brand, if you will, Kevin Costner movie, to a movie I don't even know what this is. It's called We're Back, A Dinosaur Story. I have zero recollection of this film.
Okay. There's a lot to this movie. A lot more than you would even think of when you when you saw this on the board. Okay, so this was I saw this at the Dollar Theater, back in my Arnold School days, and one of the movies that I would sneak over for to watch this animated classic. It was a $20 million film. It did about $10 million. And
$20 million for animation back then is really expensive.
It is. Well, here's what it was supposed to be, and this is how it was conceived. So it's produced by Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall. So it's that group that did Jurassic Park, and they were trying to come up with a kid's concept for an animated film that was more kid friendly, because Jurassic Park's got some stuff that's can be deemed kind of scary for kids, and stuff like that. Yeah. But so they came up with this movie, We're Back. And this is like friendly dinosaur animated kid stuff. And yeah, it didn't, do all that well. It had a really good group of voice actors, John Goodman and Rhea Perlman and Jay Leno, and some really weird ones like Julia Child and Walter Cronkite and Yardley Smith, who plays Lisa Simpson in The Simpsons, and yeah, Martin Short as well.
I almost want to watch this because of how wild it sounds.
You should watch it. It's great. I mean, they were trying to come up with a concept for Jurassic Park. It's not exactly Jurassic Park. It's different. There's a different plot to it, but it involves a scientist and stuff like that. So there's it's kind of a kid's concept, but it didn't never took off right then. And of course, it got buried too. Like a lot of movies. I mean, that was a big day. I mean, it came out the exact same day as Mrs. Doubtfire and A Perfect World. So, even though Mrs. Doubtfire had a lot of kids go to that movie. I mean, it may not have been a G-rated, PG-rated movie, but there were a lot of children watching that film. I mean, I know I took my brother, who was 7 years old at the time.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, that's I will look it up. My youngest, I mean, she's not so much into dinosaurs anymore, but she did love them, so that gives me something to watch with her. And if she gets bored and turns it off, then I'll blame it on her that I didn't finish it. How about that? Does that sound fair?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You gotta come. You gotta watch the movies that you haven't seen for 31 years, 32 years.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right, so now we're moving into our next setup here. And we're jumping ahead a week. I assume that the note is a little I have a little confusion in my brain, because there's a semicolon in a weird spot, but doesn't matter. So we're moving into it. So it's next. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? I'm like, yeah.
No, it's yeah. So this came out December 8th. The next movie.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right, so December 8th, we step into 6 Degrees of Separation, which I mean, obviously that phrase I know, so I'm thinking that's what's confusing me. I don't exactly remember this. Maybe your story on it will tell the story, and if I saw this with you, I'm going to feel like a real a-hole. The audiences should know I've said that about 20 times now, and I've been accurate. I remember most movies that I've seen with you.
Didn't see it with me. So this movie is notable because at the time it's a Will Smith movie, and
Okay.
it didn't do very well. It was Will Smith, and it's a great cast actually. It's Will Smith and Stockard Channing and Donald Sutherland and Bruce Davison and Ian McKellen, and it's a
Wow.
really wonderful cast. But it's supposed to be this like coming of age comedy drama about this guy who's kind of thrust into a different world, and that's Will Smith. And so um, at the time, he's Mr. Fresh Prince. He's got obviously the rap career at the time and the hip hop career, and then he's got the Fresh Prince of Bel Air, the very popular TV series at the time. So that's what people know him for. This is his first real chance to show he can do drama as well as comedy.
Interesting. Interesting.
So it's kind of a mix there, and it's a really good movie to go back and watch if you haven't seen it or haven't seen it for a long time, because this is the movie that kind of launches Will Smith into those more serious roles. Because without it, he doesn't get them. I mean, I don't think he does. I mean, I think you know how TV actors can kind of get noted for being TV actors, and that's not always a fair stigma, but it does happen to a lot of people, especially in comedic roles, and especially when they're iconic comedic roles. So sometimes we don't see those guys and those girls for a long time in different roles. But this is the case where Will got to do this movie and show that he could be a kind of a more serious film actor. So that's what it's kind of mostly known for. Because it wasn't by any means a hit. It was like a $15 million movie, did like 6 million. So it
Right.
got kind of lost at the box office because it came out in December, and I think they wanted to kind of be around more for the awards season, but it didn't quite land with that crowd.
Yeah, it's interesting because another note on that is to your point about Will Smith making this shift over into dramatic stuff. It was in the 90s. I mean, it really didn't change. Some might argue it still hasn't, but I can show evidence that it has. But the world of being a television actor who makes the jump to features was very difficult. And when it happened, it was a big deal.
Yeah,
Nowadays, because of how much content is streaming and goes that route, you have TV actors gladly jumping on to do short run episodic content or whatever. I'm not talking about the stuff that's on the standard networks, but you have brand name actors doing Gary Oldman does Slow Horses, for example. I mean, he's a brand name actor, but he does this episodic content. So nowadays it's that, but back in the time frame, if you think back, like it was a big deal. And the fact that Will Smith took that risk it's pretty big. It pays off. As you said, this movie may not have paid off for him in terms of box office, but it does pay off in terms for him getting some. I mean, the guy's had some roles that have just ripped my guts out. Like he's a monster in dramatic.
yeah, had lots of big dramatic leads and stuff like that. But at the time, and it's changed too because the episode counts on a lot of the stuff has changed too. With streaming and all that stuff, now you get a lot. And cable, cable was the first to kind of come along and change the episode counts a little bit, where they instead of being 22 episodes seasons or 13 and 9 or something like that, it became you know 10 episodes. So you get
Yeah.
10 episodes, and they would really make sure they almost were very much like film.
Yep. Yep.
So kind of that's where the concept kind of comes in, and that's why you'll see more film actors jump into those.
Right. And they get to work around a better schedule. They basically just stay in movie mode the entire time. They don't have to do a TV schedule because they're so brutal sometimes. It's really interesting. This is one of the things I say this a lot on the show. This is one of the things I love about the show is the learning about the past that kind of puts perspective where we are now. And it's just the amount of information that you have in your brain and just the conversations. I find that stuff super fascinating. And I've had multiple people say, "Hey, I love all the tidbits that you guys bring in, both personal lives and then movie stuff." So we'll keep going into that. So moving past that, we get into December 10th. And listen, I'm just looking ahead on this. I'm just previewing the next couple of weeks here are absolutely mind blowing in the box office. I want us to, except for maybe the first one on the list, but I want us to talk about the numbers too on this. Cause when these names drop, you guys, anybody that's a movie fan knows all of these and your jaw's going to hit the floor. I have a feeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we get into Geronimo first, right?
Yep, there we go. Geronimo.
Yeah. So Geronimo, an American Legend, which was a kind of a historical western with a really really good cat. First of all, it was directed by Walter Hill, who's mostly known for his action movies, kind of like 48 Hours, Another 48 Hours, and Southern Comfort, and movies like that. So he's been mostly known for that kind of stuff. He does this movie, which is kind of a historical piece. Really good cast. Jason Patric, who at the time was pretty big actor, and Robert Duvall, who's always been a big actor, and
Yep.
Gene Hack, a little guy named by the name of Gene Hackman, is in this movie, and Wes Studi, who of course plays Geronimo, and absolutely, I think it's a really really beautifully shot, beautiful movie, and really well done. It is a little bit slow. Okay, I mean, there's a lot of people who just don't like that, and I get that, and because it's like a right at a 2 hour movie, some people, you might be one
Well,
of them.
no. Because I've seen something slower, and it's that Kevin Costner Western that he just came out with. That was the slowest movie I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not trashing him, but dude, that movie was slow. That's my Nell. That's my Nell, brother. I wanted to like it a lot. I really did, but it was so slow. This is actually a quality Western. It's an old style. I mean, it does progress slowly. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it still feels scenic and it feels big and there's moments in it. I haven't seen it in a while, but I did watch it several times, partly for maybe even a college paper I was doing on Western stuff. But it's a very interesting film, and the cast alone is going to give you a performance that's worth watching. And I mean, it's tragic. There's a tragedy element to it, but it's a good movie.
Yeah, I mean, so it's about the surrender of Geronimo, and he's dealing with all these soldiers and things like that, and so there's a lot going on in the movie. Um, Quentin Tarantino would agree with you. He says he thought this was one of the best westerns of the era. As a modern day western, and I agree. I mean, it's really really quite an underrated film. Got to give some shout outs here. So this is got it was kind of an interesting way this movie got greenlit. So Columbia picked it up, and the head of production at the time was this guy named Mark Cannon, whose brother Neil Cannon would produce this movie, and he also produced the three Back to the Future movies, which is our namesake franchise.
Wow.
Right. And I'm going to give shout outs to a couple other guys. So we would work with Mark Cannon when he produced the movie After, which I did with Brian Pitt and Bob Chappie Shapiro. They like to hear their names on the show.
I get it. Those two especially, I get it.
So I get messages from these guys wanting to hear their names on this show. So now they've heard it twice. Maybe I'll stop getting them, So, so we did. So this is like a 6 degrees of separation thing, because of Mark Cannon, and I'm tied to the movie in some way, shape, or form. I didn't do anything on Geronimo. They also had a big problem on this movie as well because, I mean, it was a $35 million movie that did like 19 million,
Yikes.
and they struggled, because I mean at the time, I don't know why studios do this, but it's always been this weird thing where there won't be a Geronimo movie for ages, and then all of a sudden they do 3 or 4 of them. And this is what happened. There was a Geronimo TV movie that came out maybe like a week or two before this one.
No way.
For free for everybody to watch. That was like 50 million people saw that. And then, of course, when this is out, everyone's like, I just watched a Geronimo movie. So it kind of took away from its box office luster a little bit.
Well, that's that old script shopping adage of like, what was it? It's like Volcano and Dante's Peak or Dante's Inferno. Some writer wrote a great script about volcanoes and he started shopping it, and all these people passed on it. Right. And then whoever bought it, whichever one was the original, and then everybody else is making clones because they heard, it's like high school antics for sure. Like, I'm jealous. It's pretty funny. That portion is. Geronimo is not funny. Very serious movie. Unlike the next movie,
This was,
go ahead.
and just to throw another little bit in here, because another bit of history, Kuroko was originally supposed to be the movie that the company that did this film.
No
Uh,
way.
it was, and of course they had their whole issue because they had a development deal with Walter Hill at the time. So that was supposed to be who actually had this film originally. They were enthusiastic about it, and they wanted to do it, and then of course they had their whole
This
issue.
this
Bankruptcy.
I can hear the trailer. The Carloco version is this summer. Chuck Norris is Jerome.
I mean, who knows, right?
Oh my God, they would have. I mean, if you guys know, I mean, they put out some interesting movies. That is amazing. Now that is a great that's a great factoid for especially guys like me that enjoyed like the B movie sort of era, and
Yeah.
yeah, they're rolled up in that. They've had some big hits. They're not all B movies, but
Oh, no.
Carloco's done some.
We just know how they used to sell their movies with trailers and posters and, you know, yeah.
Unbelievable. All right, so we're laughing about it, and this next movie is also worth laughing at, and that would be Sister Act 2,
Can't even say it.
Back in the Habit.
Back to the habit.
Yes, I have said Back in the Habit to you. You have said it to me. It has been anytime there's a 2, we have always said Back in the, like, it has been part of our lives for this joyous movie that I don't know how it did in the box office, but I imagine it did fairly well.
It did pretty well. I mean, it was, it was certainly not it was certainly not as big as the first one. The first one was a massive, massive hit, but it did really well. Again, you $38 million movie does about 125 million. That's nice. That's nice in 1993. So yeah, it did really well. It's got a little different plot. It's kind of known too for having. We get to, well, she in the first one she's running away from the mob. Everyone knows the premise of that. And in this one she's already like a Vegas headliner, and they come and the sisters come back for her to let them know that they are working at her old high school, and they need her help. And so that's when they bring her back to her high school, and then we see people like a young Lauryn Hill in this movie, which is kind of cool, because then and she's like the big singer who's going to be coming out of school, of course. Yeah, I mean it's a cool movie. Jennifer Love Hewitt's in it as well, and yeah, I mean I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first one. I just love the first one so much, but it is a good movie.
I have a fondness for these because my mom my mom and aunt both love Sister Act. They loved it. And so I saw this with my mom. I know it's one of her jams. She loves those movies to this day, just because of the fact that it had like this, it just had this sort of nice Christian undertone about it. And so I think for her, and it's an interesting model in the modern day of filmmaking, when there's a lot of faith-based movies that come out that are, I'm not knocking on them, but they do follow a very particular pattern. Here's a faith-based movie that did not follow a particular pattern in 2 sequels, or, made 2 movies of it. And they were both very interesting and still had a faith-based element all the way through it. It's just kind of an interesting thing. Like, that was really creative filmmaking. And sometimes, some of I'm not trashing them, but some of the other ones are a little bit step and repeat. This was good. I enjoyed it. Is it?
What's that? Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what's the guy's name in this that you and I both like? Was he just in the first one? I thought he came back in the second one. The detective that gosh,
just in the first. I think he's just in the first one. I think he's back.
Okay.
Yeah. But they got
remember
who's still up? Robert Pastorelli.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. He's great. He was great. He was a great actor.
Yeah. He was a lot of fun. Good movies. They are what they are. But again, that's a brand name movie. It's a brand name sequel. So here we are in December, and this is our first of 3 brand name sequels. This is crazy to me, just listening to it. So we come out of Sister Act 2, and then we go into a movie that, look, we've talked about this movie as being we made this great statement. I got some flack and I got some agreement about Wayne's World being a musical. Well, look, it is a musical when you go see Wayne's World 2.
Yeah. I mean, this was it, right? Because like we've already talked about we've talked about Soy Mary and Axmer quite a bit on this show. We did
Yes.
two episodes. If you haven't heard those, we've done two full episodes of that movie. So this was the movie that was kind of, I mean, coming off of So I Married, which it didn't do as well in the box office. This was the movie that was supposed to put Mike Myers back in good graces with the studios and stuff because he was supposed to be a big hit, and it was not nearly as big as the first Wayne's World because again, they doubled the budget and they didn't make as much money, so it was like a $40 million movie that made 72 million, but obviously still made money, but still not as much as the first one. Um, I enjoyed Wayne's World too. I thought it was a cool movie. I liked the Wayne stock thing. I thought it was
I
funny.
I love it, and one of my favorite things about all of it is the simple fact that you get more SNL characters,
Yeah,
and one of those being we get our good friend Christopher Farley.
we do. And we also get a Christopher Walken doing
Yes.
the doing the Rob Lowe character essentially from the first movie. So I mean, again, it's a comedic sequel, so they kind of stick with the patterns of some of the first one that made it great. And he's really good in this. And Tia Carrere, of course, is amazing.
Yep.
Love Tia Carrere. But yeah, I mean, Wayne's World 2, I thought it was really funny. We have Wayne Stock. You
Yeah.
know, they ended up with Aerosmith, and they did some live songs for it, and the soundtrack is great. I mean, what a great soundtrack!
Yeah. So I remember this soundtrack had the first one was good, but it had a lot of like more classic rock bands that I said this on the previous episode I was exposed to from the Wayne's World soundtrack. But this one had some classic and newer bands on the soundtrack. If I'm not mistaken, they step in to try and capture a more modern audience with
Yeah,
some
so
of the
they
band
did.
choices.
I kind of wanted to go over the soundtrack a little bit here because of that reason. We like to go over soundtracks, good ones that we like, and I mean, yeah, they did. I mean, the first song is "Louie Louie" by Robert Plant. Robert Plant's doing that
That's a
song.
random what a random intro track, but it's great.
And then they did "Dude Looks Like a Lady," which is Aerosmith, of course, and they did this song live in the movie as well. So
Yeah.
it's like a version. And then they had "Idiot Summer" by the Gen Blossoms. So you're starting to get that mix of classics and newer bands that you were talking about. And they did the song "Superstar" uh, by which is like a collective with Chrissy Hine
Oh yeah.
vocals, and then the musicians from Urge Overkill playing behind her. So that was kind of cool. And then "I Love Rock and Roll," which of course is Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Yeah. And then "Spirit in the Sky," which is a classic '70s song by Norman Greenbaum.
Yep.
And then the "Out There" by Dinosaur Jr. So
Right.
again, you're
So now,
getting that good
which
feel. Yeah.
by the way, that album that comes out with that title track, uh, I believe is 30 years old this year. I think I was just having a conversation about it, but but again, Dinosaur Jr. is not for mass audience appeal. Jay Mascis has a weird voice. So we are definitely into alternative music territory here, which I think is great.
And that's like a 6-minute song, so you get to hear it
Yeah.
a lot. Then "Mary's House" by Four Non Blondes, who were big around this time frame.
Also not traditional vocals.
No, not traditional vocals. "Radar Love" by Golden Earring, which is a
Classic.
nice classic '70s. "Can't Get Enough" by Bad Company, of course, which is a really good
Classic.
song. Well.
Yeah.
"Frankenstein" by Edgar Winter. So you got some of these classic rock songs that are in here. "Shut Up and Dance" by Aerosmith, which again they do in the movie. If you haven't seen Wayne's World 2, you get Wayne Stock, and they eventually get Aerosmith to play Wayne Stock.
Right.
So and they get YMCA by the Village People, which actually plays in the movie if you watch it. So
Yeah. It's a good soundtrack. It's not as strong as the first one, but
yeah,
it was fun to see some alt bands on that mix. Like, again, Jim Blossoms, Four Non Blondes, Dinosaur Jr., Urge Overkill. That's a great mix up. So it is fun to have those on there. I think part of the problem with Wayne's World too, not from I enjoy it, but I think part of the problem with it was it's hard to capture something as insane as the first one
Yeah.
and repurpose it. And then, though the idea of Wayne stock is great, upping the ante, it wasn't enough. You had to up the ante with you needed more characters. Basically, it felt like it was written like an SNL skit. Like they had a hit with one, and now they're writing the next. You know, it's the next Saturday night. Got to write another SNL skit, and it just fell a little flat. It's not bad. It's just it's definitely not the powerhouse of the first one by any means at all.
It like I said, and we just talked about this with like Addams Family bringing everybody back. This movie doesn't bring back the original director, so you don't have Penelope Spheris coming back for this. You got Steven Surjik coming in to do this, and so I think it was, and there was like some infighting between Penelope Spheris and Mike Myers and the whole thing, and egos, you know, in Hollywood and making movies. We've experienced it many times, but yeah, I mean that I think you always lose a little bit sometimes when you change directors on some of these movies in the franchise. I mean, people talk about it with Star Wars all the time and some of the other bigger franchises, but it happens here with movies that are like 2 movies or 3 movies franchises as well. I mean, if you change directors, you get a different look, you get a different element, you get a different. Everything's just different. I mean, the plot, it'll change everything up on you a little bit.
Well, especially we talked about this last time with the original, but Penelope Spheris is a ridiculously punk rock director. I mean, she has got edge to her, and I'm not saying this guy isn't, but I mean, you're going to take it away from the challenge is that Mike Myers' ego and her ego, like you said, they just at this point, Mike has been right about some stuff and some wrong about some other stuff, and I'm sure it's just caused him a little bit of inner turmoil. But again, worth watching, good fun movie, nothing crazy. It's pale in comparison to the next juggernaut that steps through the door, which is going to be Schindler's freaking List, which is,
dude,
I think it's almost mandatory watching now for a lot of people, especially if they're learning about history and when they start getting into anything to deal with World War II and the Holocaust. I mean, that movie is right front and center. I remember the VHS very well. It was 2 VHS tapes.
Yeah.
You know, you had to. I mean, it was a beefy movie.
It's like big
2
and thick.
VHS tapes.
Yeah, oh, right.
Thick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like the movies would come out every once in a while that they were so big they couldn't be contained on one VHS.
Right.
Because this is over 3 hours long, and if you had an over 3 hour long movie, you didn't get it on one VHS tape. You got it on 2.
No.
The way it worked. And this is a 3 hour and 15-minute movie. Did really well. It's a $22 million movie. They never They never shoot this for $22 million these days. This would be done for like 150, 175 million easy.
I had no idea, and it was risky because they shot it black and white. They took on huge amounts of risk to tell the story. Obviously, it's a passion project of Steven Spielberg's because he puts everything he has into it, and oh boy, does it pay off.
Did really well, 322 million. I mean, of course, the Academy Award. This was a big movie that did boffo big with awards seasons. But I mean, when you're, and you were 15 at the time, I was 17 at the time, and like I saw this in theaters at Carmike 10. I definitely saw this in theaters, and I liked it. I thought it was a good movie at 17. I've liked it a lot better as I've gotten older.
100%.
I did not make out during this movie like Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have, but I didn't. But yeah, I mean, it's a classic. I mean, a classic movie. Got a lot of beef to it, man. I mean, it's a really, really great cast as well. With Liam Neeson and Ben Kingsley and Ray Fiennes, and I mean, yeah, it's pretty loaded.
Yeah, it's one of those. I did not see it in theaters. I did see it at home. We watched it as a family. I have a little bit of Jewish heritage in my family, but we watched it as that, and it's heavy, man. It's a lot. My grandmother couldn't finish it. It's just there's a lot to the movie, so it's fantastic and it's extremely well made and it's a wonderful story. It's just hefty, and for all reasons, it's one of those movies. I don't normally care about the Oscars. I have friends that use it as a benchmark, and I just don't think it's a benchmark in a lot of ways, me personally. However, this is one of the exceptions to that where it deserved every bit of acclaim and award it got because it was just, it took a lot of moxie to pull this off. And it is clearly why it's considered one of the classics. And like I said, I know a lot of schools that use it as a learning tool because of what it is. And that if your film can transcend just being art and become into something bigger like that, that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and of course, it did win a ton of Academy Awards and won Best Picture and won Best Director and Best Screenplay and Original Score and Film Editing and Cinematography and Art Direction and everything else. It was a huge movie, and I mean, it deserved everything it got and more. And you're right. It tells a very big story that needs to be told. It needs to keep being told, and to this day, we still go through this. To be
right.
honest with you. I mean, we,
right.
Talk about it a lot with the with the Jewish people, and I mean, the story needs to continue to be told because you worry about repeating things like this if you don't tell these stories. And so, kudos to Steven Spielberg because he always did a great job. I mean, like in the same year that you released Jurassic Park,
I know
you released this movie. That's a lot, and he also released We're Back. He had a big 1993, bro.
Yeah, he did. I mean, do you feel though that Beethoven's the Second felt any pressure coming out 2 days later up against Schindler's List? Do you think parents just dropped their kids off at Beethoven's Second and said, "Watch it twice, kids. I'll be back in 3 hours"? I mean, what happens if you're Beethoven's Second?
Like, kids get out of Beethoven's Second because it's like an hour and a half movie. It's like I think it was like an hour and 25 minutes, hour and 29 minutes or something like that.
Lord.
And then they're waiting around for their parents to finish Schindler's List. Where they walk into Schindler's List and are shocked.
Right.
It's not Beethoven's Second. Yeah, I mean, Beethoven's Second. This was a dollar theater one for me. I saw this at the dollar theater. I had to see it. I saw the first movie. I loved it.
Right.
This one has, of course, Charles Grodin in it again, which
that's what I was about to say. Yeah. People should know that Tony will go see almost anything with Charles Grodin in it. Charles Grodin is, Charles Grodin could have been a Nell, and he might have actually liked it.
Sure, I will watch anything with the late, great Charles Grodin. Now, listen. I mean, not just because he's in Sorry Mary Maxwell, by the way, but also because he stars in one of the greatest buddy comedy action movies of all time, Midnight Run, which is a movie that predates our friendship, so we don't get to talk about it that often on this show.
But I can say this:
classic.
That has been your favorite movie to bring up, because you have lots of them. But that has been your favorite movie to bring up to me. For we are going on however many years we're at now. We don't need to date ourselves anymore. However many years, a couple of decades. You've said the same thing about that movie. So it is. Tony is, if nothing else, extremely consistent with loving the movie and Charles Grodin. There is no doubt in my mind. Beethoven's Second, our third in a month, folks. Our third sequel in a month. It's getting a little obnoxious. I'm sure it did not do that well. There's no way it did that well.
It did great. I mean, it was a.
Did it really?
They didn't. They did it for like 15 million, and it did like 119. Well, that's solid.
Oh, my bad. That's especially It's
good. Now, when they kind of go deeper into the Beethoven catalog, they start getting into some direct to video movies and stuff like that. But This did really well, and it had Debbie Mazar in it and Chris Penn as well as kind of
Yeah.
the henchmen types and the ones who are trying to steal Beethoven. So of course, Debbie is in So I Married an Axe Murderer
Yes.
because she was electrocuted. You know,
Ever been electrocuted?
right?
And we've mentioned Chris Penn on our from the karate movie that he was not Never Back Down.
Best, never back down. No, Best of the Best.
Best of the Best 2. Yeah, another sequel that did come out it came out in 92, didn't it?
Yeah, we've talked about Best of the Best too. He dies in that movie.
Yeah, that's right. And he's the best part until Eric Roberts picks up the ball. Anyway, that's a tangent for another day. Beethoven second does fairly well. I am going to say I saw this movie in theaters. Look, folks need to know this is not the first one of this, but people need to know what's coming. And if we could travel back in time, I would warn everyone, be prepared for John Grisham because he's going to relentlessly make movies for a couple of years, and be ready for the books, the trend, the blockbuster sensation, John Grisham. And we step into his first movie with Julia Roberts, and that's Pelican Brief.
Yeah, I mean, originally it took a while to get Julia on this movie because she's been known to take these hiatuses in her career. And if you got the money to do it, that's great, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So why? But she was on like an over year-long hiatus, and all of a sudden they brought back Alan J. Pakula, who directed this movie, got her back to come in and do this movie with Denzel Washington that was filmed down in New Orleans. And I've heard about it for many, many, many years through my escapades of traveling in New Orleans and doing work with all the filmmakers that were on this film. I hear stories about the Pelican Brief for ages. But I really enjoyed the Pelican Brief. I saw this one with my mom. This was a Carmike Tin mother Tony movie. I've always been a huge Julia Roberts fan, especially back in the day, and Denzel Washington is still great.
Yeah, they smash it in this, and I remember I saw this one with my parents as well. My dad really likes thrillers, and so we went to go see this one. And again, listen, the John Grisham thing at this point, The Firm has come out, and the world has changed. John Grisham movies for life. That's what we're stepping into.
You said that with a lot of, vigor and a lot of conviction, Do
you have any good you teased up these stories. Do you have any stories you can actually tell about the Pelican Brief from its time in New Orleans?
No, just, they would talk about, shutting down certain roads and things like that. We shut down 6 blocks to do this, to do the Pelican.
My God.
On these busy parts of the French Quarter and stuff. I mean, well, I'm doing a movie that we can't shut down even the corner of the street, so I don't have 50 people walk through the shot and get yelled at by the first AD. You know who you are. You know who you are because you listen to the show. But anyway, I'm getting yelled at for that. Meanwhile, these guys are shutting down, 10 blocks for movies like these.
Right.
That's a killer, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's tough to shoot there. I mean, anyway, because there's people walking around everywhere.
100%. 100%. It's brutal.
And your bosses expect you to make sure that none of these people accidentally wind up in the shot. I don't know how that gets done. We've never successfully done it. We have
because
to
they're all
find garbage.
Because the people are all inebriated on top of it because they're in New Orleans to party, and it's like, can we just shoot anywhere else but Bourbon Street? And it's like, no, it's got to be Bourbon. It's like, you can't tell the difference after a while. You really can't.
So. No, absolutely not. I mean, I remember, and this will come up later, but I remember shooting a Jean-Claude movie there, and we were doing overnights, and shooting till like 5 a.m. in the French Quarter on Bourbon Street and places like that. And I was like, dude, like, what am I supposed to do? Go up to the drunkest man in the world and tell him to stop?
Right.
It's like that happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough shooting there sometimes, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. And so yeah, I mean, they would tell me stories about it. I just hear random things. I mean, nothing bad, but they
Yeah.
talk about the movie. And they talk about all kinds of movies that were shot there, including Hard Target, which we talked about as well.
Of course. So how does this movie end up doing in the box office? Because I remember it doing, seems like it did well. I remember it having a lot of buzz around it.
I mean, it was a $45 million movie. It did 195, 196, somewhere in there. Yeah, it did really well. I mean, it was a big hit. I mean, the Grisham movies were explosive at the time, man. The Firm and Pelican Brief, they were like getting it all started. Like you said, John Grisham's life, you know?
Think about this for perspective. We have a film that sweeps the Oscars that's 3.5 hours long about the freaking Holocaust, and they only spent 22 million. Here we have a movie about Denzel and Julia running through the streets. The reason that movie cost $45 million because they were paying off all the people to close the streets.
Right, exactly.
Holy cow, what a contrast.
They had a good cast on this one too, though. I mean, it was like Sam Shepard's in it, and John Hurd, the late great John Hurd, and Tony Goldwyn from. I mean, it's a really, really, really good cast. Robert Culp is in it, the late great Robert Culp, Stanley Tucci, Hume Cronin, John Lithgow. I mean, so they had to, that's a pretty beefy cast that you gotta pay as well.
Yeah, no, it's big. It's definitely that. And look, it's one of those things of like the way the movies flow. You never know what's going to happen. Schindler's might have been shot overseas as well, which changes the budget and makes it easier and all that kind of stuff. The Pelican Brief at the end of the day is a good movie. In fact, I'm making fun of the Grisham effect, but the reality of it is his movies are fun as heck to watch because they're thrillers with words. They're just thrillers with words, but somehow they make the words really. The director and the team and the actors do a fantastic job of making talking lawyers just interesting and thrilling. I don't know what else to say about it other than that.
People wanted to be in those movies too.
Yeah.
I mean, when those came up, people wanted to take those movies. They wanted to be in them. They were kind of like Marvel at the time. I mean, it's like Grisham's films. Like, he had a big grouping of films that they did of his books, and he was amazing.
It was the GCU.
Oh, go ahead.
I was saying it was the GCU, the Grisham Cinematic Universe.
Nice, I like it.
It's a very good movie. If you haven't seen it, it's worth a watch for sure.
No,
is there anything else you want to add on that one?
No, that's about it. I mean, it was a Tony Mom movie. Again, saw it at Carmike 10. I was like talking about those old theaters. I was driving around one thing I want to say. I was driving around the other day and doing some of my work when I drive around and stuff, and was looking at some of the old buildings around here in St. Louis that used to be movie theaters, and I'm just like, wow. I mean, the buildings are still there, but there's something else now. And it really just takes me back. And this is how this whole show kind of launched, was based on, those old theaters and stuff. So I love to talk about those old theaters. And, I was looking at our old Dollar Theater here in St. Louis. It's like in this corner, kind of like ours was down there, but this building's still standing. It's still there. It's just been repurposed. And, we had this twin cinema that had this really cool layout and design. And now it's like it's there for like a meeting place and reception hall or something like that. And yeah, I mean, and then the other Dollar Theater that we had that came later, and it's like been completely gutted. So yeah, it's I kind of wax a little poetic on it and nostalgic about it, but it's kind of cool to see them.
Yeah, every time the Ford. Where I take my truck, I have a Ford, and the dealership is right there by the old Bel Air Twin. And I can't tell you how many times I've wanted just to go smash a window and go inside so bad. I just want to look around. I know it's full of crap because someone told me they got in once, but it sure would be cool. Because I saw I saw Return of the Jedi there, and I remember it clear as day. And that's one of the few ones I remember. I was 5 or 6 years old when that came out. 5 years old, I think. And I remember it. And so it's just one of those spots that holds a really special place. But again, movie theaters have changed. I love the ones we have in terms of, like, we have Nexus, and that's obviously, we've not talked about it much on this show, but Tony and I have a weird connection to a movie theater. And then I have a friend that owns a theater out in Fresno. And so I appreciate them still, and especially the industry. It's just changed so much that I miss those old days of the movie theater being romantic, and they were respected, and now they're just kind of like places to dump your kids in a lot of ways. So,
Well, see, the Bel Air too is that building. Last time I was down there, it was still standing.
It is. That's what I'm saying. I want to break the window and go inside.
But there's nothing there, right? There's not a business or anything. It's just a building that still stands for nostalgia reasons, essentially.
Yeah, it's full of junk. I'd take it over and turn it into a back for our future podcast home headquarters and movie theater.
That'd be awesome.
It'd be amazing.
That's cool.
All right, so what do we got for Tony's picks? We got Tony's picks up on deck. What should we watch? You've got a pretty big list here. What are we pulling from?
Yeah, we have some really big movies that I'm sure a lot of people have seen. I'm going to go with 6 Degrees of Separation. It launches a big career for a big actor. I know Will Smith. I know a lot of people don't like him much anymore, quite honestly, because of the whole slapping incident. I know a lot of people are kind of down on him, but a lot of people used to really like him. So this is kind of what launched that version of him. So I think a lot of people should give it a watch. You're going to see a hint of that Fresh Prince Bel-Air guy in this role. So it's kind of a cool thing to see, but in a different role altogether. And the other one I would say is A Perfect World, because I don't think a lot of people have seen that as much.
Yeah.
Kind of a cool, kind of lost Clint Eastwood movie that not everyone talks about, but good role for Kevin Costner as well. So those would be my two. Check them out.
There we go. Yeah, if you have a chance. Again, a lot of times the movies we talk about are a little bit challenging to find. I have found that Amazon has, not on Prime, you're going to have to rent these, but luckily the rentals are only like $2. They're almost far more prices. So you can jump in there, rent yourself a little movie, and watch some of this stuff if you can't find it on your streaming app, the one of 600 apps that you all pay for. If you can't find it there, you can typically find these on Amazon for rent. And if you wait a little while, they come back around. Sometimes on HBO Max. I've noticed there's been a few things on Max lately. So
go to imdb.com, put the movie title in the search engine, and then look underneath, and they'll usually do a really good job of telling you which streaming sites and stuff where the movie is, and that's the best way to kind of maybe find them. Otherwise, you can always message us at any of our socials, and now we're getting kind of a bigger following on Facebook, so you can always get us there. Send me a message, and I'll tell you exactly where to go to find the movie.
Well, I made it public, and if Tony wants to share it, you can, but I recently found amazing archive. I found the very first movie that we all made. Yes. And we've talked about the subway before. We've talked about these characters. You get to meet a lot of these people that are going to show up. You guys have never met them. You get to see them in roles. You get to see me acting. You get to see Tony acting. You get to see, there's one guy in there that shows up at the very end. I don't even know. We haven't even talked about it. But this guy's name is Martin, and no one knows what happened to him. He just vanished one day and never came back.
That's right. Holy cow. Yeah. I watched it the other night. Sent it to me. And I was like, I got to put this up. And I got busy with something. I haven't put it up yet, but I'm going to put it up as of when people listen to this. This will be up on our social media site. So check it out. It's called, you can go ahead and give the title of it so that everyone knows.
It's called Can't Wait 1 Minute More. And it is a blatant Clerks ripoff. Just no doubt about it.
We're better. We're better than Clerks.
Better.
It is.
It is literally our first film. If you go look at the credits, and they're very poorly done, but if you look at the credits, it has a lot of our names on it. It's very fascinating. If you have a chance and you want to see it, it's good. The only thing I'll say is it is not necessarily safe for work, not because of anything pornographic or anything lewd, but there is some language that's a little bit questionable. Again, 90s teenagers saying stupid stuff. This was in 96 or 97, I think.
That's a little later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I remember having a conversation with another friend of ours. I'm not going to name him here, but I had it because it's a weird thing you said. But I remember having a conversation about that movie, and he's like, "Yeah, Tony, you're the best thing that happened in that flick." And making it sound like because I do have a funny little bit in that movie.
Oh, this
Uh,
little, yeah, oh, yes, it's classic.
but he really liked that, but he made it sound like he was watching it from a standpoint of it being an Academy Award winning, you know, film. Like you're the best thing about that flick. And I was like, dude, it's just a bunch of goobers like getting together to make a movie.
I mean, all we wanted to do, I think that was post Bloodhound Gang for me, if I'm not mistaken.
Around that, it's right around there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was making that because I wanted to go to NYU. Anyway, if you have a chance, maybe we'll do a special episode one day and talk through it because it's kind of funny. And we'd have to pause it and tell you guys there's lots of stuff all the way through that. Just amazing little nuances and notes and conversations about Steven's eyebrow piercings. That came up at one point. There's lots of great stuff in there. There's lots of people's voices that yeah. Anyway, there's a lot to unpack in that. But if you have a chance, check it out. It's on our socials. If like Tony said, if you have any trouble finding any of these movies or you have thoughts of your own, feel free to hit us up on all the social channels. Facebook is the most active simply because it's more of a community base. There's people talking back and forth and saying stuff. So if you have a chance, head over that way. Again, Happy New Year. We hope that it's been great. And we hope that your holidays were great. We hope that our holidays were great.
Let's hope everyone's holidays are great.
In the future, in the past. That's what happens on this show.
Right.
Yeah. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
Later.